Halloween is right around the corner and you're probably going to start seeing a couple of these different products over in your local spooky store. So we're going to be going over how to use scar wax along with also sinwax. This is my preferred scar wax alternative. Liquid latex along with also silicone-based compound, which is my favorite material to go and use to make fake wounds, scars, anything like that. But this stuff's pretty complicated to use. So let's get into it. We're going to start off with liquid latex. I need a nice clean surface for my skin, and because I have little tiny hairs on my face, I want to make sure I at least create a smooth surface for this. Liquid latex, when it comes off, peels, and I don't really want to go and peel off a bunch of hair. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to very quickly shave the area that I'm going to put this onto. Very lightly shave it, because I have a couple of hairs that are there. Then I'm gonna go and just dry all of that off and make sure the skin is nice and clean. Latex allergies are actually really common, so make sure you test this out on somewhere like your wrist about 24 hours before you go and apply this to your face, just to make sure you are not allergic to it. Now, liquid latex is pretty easy to work with. You do have a decent amount of work time before it fully and totally sets or dries. The stuff that I have is pretty liquidy, but that's not a problem. The only thing is liquid latex, you can so make realistic wounds or cuts or anything that you want to go and make. It's just not necessarily the best material to go and use, but it does work and you will see it a lot in Halloween stores. So to make a fake wound or a fake cut with this, we're going to pull apart a piece of cotton. And we're really not going to need a lot of this. We're just going to need a little tiny piece at the edge here. And I'm just going to pull apart one more piece as well too. And this is going to be to build the edges of the fake wound that I want to make. And I'm going to be applying it to right here on my cheek. Now to make this stick better too, you can always put down some Prozaid, which is this stuff here. You just want to make sure if you're using something like this, you have the remover for it. Now, I'm not going to be using it for the liquid latex, but I will be using it for the silicone. And that's kind of something that you do need for that product. But to have this stick down, what I'm going to do is I am going to take a Q-tip, so one of these, and I'm going to dip it into the liquid latex, and we're going to be using the liquid latex as an adhesive. So where I want this to go, we're going to say maybe it is right here. Then we're going to take our piece of cotton and follow that up. And I'm just going to pull off the extra material at the edges. Same thing with also here. Press down and pull up some of that extra cotton there at the edge. Now again, I'm using some pretty thin pieces, which is fine. Then I'm just going to pull this piece apart a little bit more. And after it's pulled apart, I'm going to do the same exact thing that I did on the other side. Take that Q-tip, follow up on this other side here. I'm leaving a little bit in the center. And then I'm going to take that piece of cotton and I'm going to put it down. Then I'm just going to pull at the edge. So pull right there. Pull right here. And that's pretty good. There is this little extra piece here that I have that is just sticking up. So I'm just gonna pull that more. And that looks pretty good. Now you can always use more cotton at the edges to build up. The only thing with this is the more cotton that you use, it just starts to look less and less and less realistic. Now I'm taking this Q-tip and I am painting the cotton with the liquid latex. Liquid latex dries in layers, and as it dries, you'll start to notice that it might turn either clear or a little yellow depending on how many layers you end up putting down. With liquid latex too, you can always use scar wax around the edges to blend it even more. But we're not going to be doing that. We're just going to be using the liquid latex to get a very, very simple wound put down onto our cheek. And I'm just using the liquid latex at the edges to try to blend that in a bit with my skin. Which, it blends a little, but again, not the best material to go and use for realistic wounds, cuts, scars, anything of that sort. But again, it does work. Liquid latex also really doesn't have a lot of bend to it when it dries, so if you're putting it somewhere, make sure it's not somewhere where there's too much movement. Right here at the edge, if I open my mouth too much, it might start to separate from the skin. So if you're going to be using a product like this, usually the area here, forehead, and anywhere that doesn't have a lot of movement is best. Do not use this product in your hair, on your hair, over your eyes. You just want to keep it out of those different areas. To take off the shine from liquid latex, we're going to take some either translucent setting powder or some setting powder. Go around the edges. And then it'll look less shiny. Now, we're going to use some foundation over it. So some flesh tone foundation. A makeup sponge. Put that on there. You're really not going to need a ton of it. And we're going to put that over top. Now again, you can see this really doesn't look very realistic, but it works for if you're doing makeup. You can always layer other cosmetics on top of it. Now that you have foundation over it, we can add some fake blood to the center of it. I am using this from Narrative Cosmetics. This is an alcohol-based one, and it's just one of my favorites to go and use. So with a makeup brush, I'm gonna put that onto there, and we can put it into the center. Now you can also use fake blood to blend the edges a bit too, to make it look a bit more realistic. Now I'm going to add some shadow in there, and I'm going to be using an eye pencil for that. And there goes my cat. You can also use some eyeshadow, which I'm going to follow up with just a small amount of some black. You can see using that is adding a bit more of realism to it, but again, liquid latex isn't the most realistic thing that you can go and use. But it does work for quick makeup looks. And there you go, that is how you use liquid latex. If you wanted to build up the edges more, you'd use more cotton, and you'd pretty much go from there. And there you go, there is a closer look at it. Removing liquid latex is really easy, so we're just going to take our finger at the edge, and we're going to very gently peel that off. Now that's a reason why we shave that area. And there you go. Easy to remove. Then we are going to just remove this with some makeup remover, clean the skin, and move on to the next one. Scar wax and also sinwax. Scar wax is what you're going to typically see in a lot of Halloween stores though, so we're going to start off with this. Usually scar wax has kind of this texture to it. It is a waxy material, it moves around easy, and it's pretty sticky. But here's the thing, it sometimes ends up peeling from the skin, so you're gonna need to put down some sort of adhesive, like some Prozaid, which we talked about before, to keep it in place. Now to put down some Prozaid, and we're really not gonna need much of this. This stuff is so incredibly sticky. You could always use something like eyelash glue as well too, but eyelash glue just is not going to stick as long. So we're just gonna put down a little bit here. Then we are going to grab some of this here, which you want to have lotion on your fingers. So I'm going to be using this to keep my fingers from sticking to it, because this stuff, when it heats up, it gets grody. So I'm just putting it onto the tips of my fingers, taking my hand and scooping a little bit out of here. Now you can always use a metal tool to go and do this as well too. Then you have your piece. And this stuff is really easy to go and move around. I suggest putting a bit more lotion onto your fingers because it does get really, really sticky, especially when you have heat applied to it. So I'm just working it a little bit, getting it warmed up slightly, and pulling it a little bit to how I want it to look on my face. Then we can take it and stick it down. Now see, right up there it pulled a little bit. This stuff isn't very elastic, unlike the sinwax. Sinwax is very elastic in comparison, but this stuff gets the job done and it can look very, very realistic. I use my finger first to spread it out on both sides. So that will work for now. And this one is also a almost flesh tone color, so I don't have to go and add too much cosmetic to the top of it. Now we can use our metal tool and blend it in with the skin around. And you can see it's starting to blend in with the skin, which gives it more of a realistic look in comparison to the liquid latex that we used before. Then we're going to go around the edges with a paper towel to go and blot it and take off some of that additional shine. Now, if anything was lifting up, you just go back around and you blend it further into the skin with your metal tool. Then in the center, we're going to create a divot. So I am using this metal tool here that has a little point to it, dipping it into my lotion, wiping off some of that additional material there. And then I'm going to go in the center and I'm going to peel it a little bit. So I'm pressing in like that, dragging down. And you can kind of see that what it's doing at the edges is it's creating kind of this rigid look, which is great because cuts anyway will not typically be very clean. They'll usually be pretty jagged at the edges. And you'd expect in the center here that you're going to have kind of like an open area, maybe because it's a little bigger, which we can remove some of the material from the center there and then push down some of the area where it pulled a bit. Now, if this wasn't a proper flesh tone, what you do is you take some foundation, very, very light amount of it, and you would go over this and start to blend it. To take off any additional shine, we're just going to be using a small bit of powder, brushing that on there. Then we are good to put some fake blood in there. So exactly like what we did with the liquid latex, fake blood, again, I'm using this. So now in the center, again, we're putting some fake blood in there. So some powdered eyeshadow to give it a shadow in the inner portion, which I'm doing right now. Then we're just going to add a little bit more fake blood over in that. Now this looks a bit more realistic in comparison to the liquid latex. It has more texture to it. It's pushed up a bit more. It's a bit easier to use and you can always blend it. It's also more forgiving in comparison. But this is just normal scar wax. Again, I love to use sinwax, which we're going to use in a moment. Now removing this is easy. You're gonna take your metal sculpting tool and you're just gonna swipe up. So just like that, it'll come right off. You might still have a little adhesive underneath it, so you might have to go and take that off later. But there you go. Now to use sinwax, which is my favorite scar wax alternative. The only thing is sinwax is a little difficult to use. It's very, 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 very solid. So to use it, you're gonna have to scoop some of it out with a metal tool, just like such. And this does get very sticky as it heats up, so it is a good idea to have some lotion to the side or petroleum jelly. Petroleum jelly will break it down though, but lotion is usually a better alternative unless you really want to blend the edges with it. You can also still use lotion to do so, but if you want to have it melt into your skin, petroleum jelly will help to break it down. So putting a little bit of lotion onto our fingers, and then it's easy to start to warm this up. As it warms up, it's going to get almost the consistency of what the scar wax was. The only thing is it doesn't get as oily and it also doesn't get as soft. But as it heats up, the little pieces that are in this are going to start to meld into everything and it's going to become almost like a putty. sort of like that. You can put cosmetic over it to make it look a little bit more like your skin tone, and you can also add a small amount of cosmetic into it as you slowly mix it together. But this is ready to use, so we're going to apply it. The same exact thing that we did for the scar wax. Put a small amount down onto a clean portion of our skin, so we're gonna put this right here. Now we can start to shape this. I am slowly pulling it. I'm going to leave it a little bit thicker at the center. And that should be just about good. Now I do have a larger piece here. Typically I would use something that's just a little bit smaller than this to make a relatively small fake wound, but this is good. This will work. And it's also going to be easier to at least show how you sculpt it. Now you can see that the Pros-Aid here is pretty dry, so we can take that and it's just going to stick right down to it. So what I'm going to do now is just dip this metal tool into some of my lotion here. Again, Vaseline or petroleum jelly will help to go and break this down, and it'll help to smooth it out even further. But that also makes it softer, and because it gets softer, it can sometimes be a little bit harder to work with, and it just kind of gets everywhere. Now I'm using my fingers to spread it down. And put it into place. Then I'm going to go back in with this metal tool, and I am going to start to blend it in with my flesh. Using some lotion and my finger to further blend that in with the skin. This stuff also too is a bit stiffer than regular scar wax. There are different stiffnesses of scar wax that you can get. The one that I have is a medium soft one that I used before, but sinwax is typically a little bit more on the firmer side. And as it heats up with the body, it does get a little bit softer, but it still does maintain some of its rigidity, which is great. Just going to go around, dab off the remainder of the lotion. And there you go. It looks like it's pretty much seamlessly blended in with my skin. You can also use a paper towel, a washcloth, anything like that to give it some texture back to make it look more like actual skin as well too, because as you're moving this around, it does get pretty shiny. But the thing is you can always add texture into it after you are done. Now again, dipping our metal tool into some lotion to start to create a cut. Now you can see that this moves a little bit easier than the other product that I used before, so the regular scar wax. It doesn't pull as much at the edges, which is something that I do prefer. And it's just easier to manipulate and move around. So when you're content with whatever you want it to look like, which I think we're going to roll with it kind of like this here. Now I'm going in with this pointed tool here. Has a little bit of lotion on it, just to get that a little deeper inside and just to get a bit more of a line here and down here. So again, I'm using this, which is the alcohol-based fake blood, painting this into the center of the fake wound. And because this is a flesh tone for me, I'm not going to go around the edges with any additional cosmetic. It doesn't necessarily need it. But if you wanted to take some of the shine off of it, what you could always do is use some translucent setting powder or setting powder at the edges, which is something that I will brush on after this fake blood dries in the center. But I'm just taking off a little bit of the shine at the edges, like such. Then I'm going to go into the center with some of this black eyeshadow in here, like I did with the other two, and then I can blend it in there with some fake blood. And then there you go. That is what sinwax looks like after you've done a little bit of cosmetizing to it. It has a lot more movement to it, so it's not really going too far. It's not going to really break apart as easily as scar wax typically would. And you can make some pretty gnarly looking things with this. It blends in with the skin very, very well. And it's just my favorite alternative to use for things like fake wounds and stuff of that sort. Plus also too, great for cosplay, great for stuff like that, but keep in mind it is a softer material. If someone decides that they're gonna like, you know, pick at it, touch it, whatever the case is, it will start to come off, but it does last, at least in my case from when I've used it out and stuff like that, it does last longer than the typical scar wax just because of the material that it is. Same exact way that we removed the regular scar wax, you take a metal sculpting tool and you just swipe it up like that. There will probably be a bit more resistance with this, and it's also going to probably leave some stuff behind in comparison. It's also pretty goopy when you take it off, but same exact thing. Remove it exactly like you did the scar wax. If there's anything that's left behind, use petroleum jelly to go and break it down more, along with also to use a remover to get off any adhesive that you use to stick it down. Now on to our next one, which is going to be 2-part silicone compound. Before I go and use this, I'm going to put down some Pros-Aid just because this stuff only has about 10 minutes of work time. So any little second that you have possibly for this, you definitely need it. If you don't have an adhesive underneath it, it's just not going to stick down properly and it's not going to look the way that you want it to. This stuff can also be very shiny, so keep that in mind that it does have some shine to it, so you do have to use some sort of powder over it. So I have 2 popsicle sticks labeled A and B. Good idea to do this because if you get parts A into parts B or B into A, your stuff's done, your stuff's ruined, and this stuff isn't necessarily the cheapest. So it's a 1-to-1 ratio, so part A, little scoop in there, so part A there, which we're going to put onto a plate here. I'll put it right there, part A. And as soon as these two touch, that is when it starts to then part B. Now before we start to mix part A and part B together, you need to add some sort of cosmetic into it so you can get the flesh tone that you desire for it, which we're not going to need a ton, so just a little drop there, a little drop there, and maybe a little tiny one there. So we have that here. Now we are going to start to mix this together. And now that I've mixed it together, it is now activated. So this is going to start stiffening up pretty much as soon as you mix them together. You have about a 10-minute work time to get this onto your skin into whatever desired cut, wound, abrasion, whatever you are going for that you would want to create with this. Now normally I let it sit for just a little bit because it is very, very goopy first. You can kind of see here, it's running a little bit. Again, it's going to stiffen up really quick, and it stiffens up quicker as soon as you put it onto your skin because when it warms up, it just starts to work even faster. Now, we are going to need metal sculpting tools to get this onto our skin. So we're going to take a little scoop of this and follow along with where we put down some of the adhesive. And we're going to make a very small cut. Now you can layer this stuff, you can make this stuff look pretty gnarly as you work with it, but it does start off goopy. So while you are working with it, you're gonna have to work in layers with it. And again, you only have about a 10-minute work time with this. So that makes things very interesting to say the least. As it starts to stiffen up too, you'll be able to add some ridges to it. Which this stuff is still very, very goopy. You can see it's going to run a little bit as I put it down. But it's not going to be like that for very long. It's going to stiffen up pretty quickly. Now I'm taking the tool, cleaning it, and I'm going to use this tool to get it pulled out over at the edges a little bit to try to make it lay flush with my skin. Keep in mind any little bit of this material that you have at the edges, if it is stuck there and it dries, this is going to be a full solid piece. So working with it before it fully stiffens is what you need to do as you go along. I'm just going to go along the edge, wipe off a little bit of that material. I'm using this piece of cotton to blend it with my skin a bit more. And I can tell that it's starting to stiffen up. So right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit more to give it just a bit more push from my skin and kind of like paint that on. We don't want any bit of that hanging down. So that looks pretty good. Then we can go around the edges again. Clean some of that up. In the inner portions, I'm just going to take a bit more of the material, which you could have always put down some scar wax to make it look like you had some fleshy bits in the intersection. But I'm just going to add a little bit of that inside, like such. So it's not too smooth in the inner portion, giving it some texture in there, and filling it in slightly like a cut typically would be filled in. So what I'm doing is I'm going in there and I'm chewing up the edges a little bit. Then we're just going to let it set the rest of the way. And at this point, it's probably going to be fully and totally good to cosmetize over in the next about 3 to 5 minutes. Silicone can be pretty shiny, so like we've done with the others, a little bit of powder to take some of that shine off will help to make it more realistic looking. At the edges, want to use some sort of foundation or something along those lines. So the same color that I used, I'm going to be putting onto a brush, going around the edges, and just working that into the skin. Then I'm going to follow it up again with a bit more powder to take some more of that shine off. Now with cosmetizing this, typically you're going to want to use like grease paints, or in my case, actual cosmetics that are made for special effects. Kind of like this blood that I've been using the entire time that I've been making these fake wounds and cuts. So I'm filling that in the center, along with also a little bit of shadow again too, like we did for all of the others. Some of these edges here are pretty smooth, so we can just take our finger, tap some of that there, and just blend that a bit further. So there is a fake wound using the silicone. Now again, this stuff can be pretty difficult to work with. You only have 10 minutes to work with it, and after that, it's pretty much stuck where it's stuck. You can make some very realistic looking things with this. It's just one of those materials that, with the limited amount of work time that you have, it can be very limiting as to what you can do. This is one of those materials that normally you'd probably want someone else working on you to be able to use it. Now all you need to do to remove this is try to find a corner and really just start to peel. It's pretty easy to come off. That's why we used adhesive underneath it to keep it in place, because as soon as a corner lifts on this, this thing is coming off. This stuff pretty much will just peel right off, but you might want to use a little bit of adhesive remover. I have this Prozade adhesive remover, and when you're peeling this, after you've found an edge, you take a Q-tip and you start to put it under it just like that to break up the adhesive, and it'll peel. Now, I wasn't too concerned about this just because it's a smaller piece. I already had my skin shaven. There wasn't really any hair for it to go and grip onto. But this material, and you might actually be able to use something like this again after you've put it down. This material, very, 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 very stretchy, has a lot of give to it. But as soon as it starts to lift up at a corner, normally the thing is gonna start to peel off. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. There are more tutorials that are over my profile. I do a bunch of cosplay and other things of that sort. Take care, have a good one. I'll see you all in the next one. Okay, bye!